This podcast series is part of the mission of the New York Intellectual Property Law Association, NYIPLA, Past Presidents Committee, to preserve a snippet of the history of our association through the eyes of our past presidents, and to provide continuity for our century-old association values and traditions for future NYIPLA leaders. I'm Rob Rando, the current president of NYIPLA for the 2023-2024 term. Today, we are pleased to have with us John D. Murnane. He was the 82nd president of the NYIPLA during the 2004-2005 term. Welcome, John. Before we get started with my question, is there anything you'd like to tell us?
Well, thank you very much, Rob. I'm a patent attorney. I have been 45 years this May. Been doing it since 1979. And I've been doing mostly litigation in that time. When I started, you did everything. You did prosecution, trademark, copyright, but it was always mostly litigation. And since 2005, the litigations have mostly been pharmaceutical. We represent brand companies in Hatch-Waxman cases.
And who are you with today?
The Venable Law Firm. I'm a partner at Venable here in New York.
Yep. So how did you first become aware of NYIPLA?
When I was a first-year associate, the first firm I was with was Brumbaugh, Graves, Donahue, and Raymond. Was an old-line New York firm with a wonderful reputation. I went right from law school to the Brumbaugh firm. And the then president of the well, it was called the New York Patent Law Association then, Bill Eberly. He asked me to help. I was a first-year associate, and they were doing an amicus brief for the Chakrabarty case, the case that the Supreme Court decided, which gave us the biotech industry. And so that was, I think I'd been there maybe a week or a few days, and he said, we have to do this amicus brief, and you and I are going to do it. So that was how I learned about the NYIPLA, or the New York Patent Law Association at the time.
Wow, that was a great way to join.
Yeah, it was good. Yeah, I've been a lucky guy.
Oh, it's very exciting. Being on the amicus brief committee, this is a tremendous opportunity, especially for associates.
Yeah, it was great.
So I was going to ask you what inspired you to join, but I guess you've answered that already.
Well, yeah, and Bill, he was the president at the time, and the firm had a couple of former presidents, Granville Brumbaugh, the lead name partner, and he was still active, and Frank Ford, he had been a president as well. And they encouraged me to do, frankly, whatever anyone asked me to do with respect to the NYIPLA, or the New York Patent Law Association at the time. So I did.
Yeah, so what kind of activities and roles did you engage in early on as a member?
Whatever they asked me to do, if there was a CLE meeting, they'd give me a camera and they'd say, go to the meeting and take pictures of people. There was no executive director in those days. The firms ran it completely themselves, all on a volunteer basis. So as a first-year associate, you went, you do what they said. They said, take pictures. So I did, and I tried not to be obtrusive at the meetings, but I did it. I enjoyed going. I enjoyed going to the meetings and meeting people. So, and then after a while, they asked me, even when I was an associate, to be on panels at the meeting. Sometimes one of the partners had been asked to speak on a panel. They used to have a fall program every year. The NYPLA had a fall program, and sometimes the partners, they couldn't go. They were tied up. So I was asked a couple of times to participate as a panel member. So I did that, and it just kind of evolved from that. I just continued to go to meetings, and then they would ask me to do more things.
And did there come a time when you decided you wanted to assume a leadership role, or did it evolve over time?
It kind of evolved, Rob, because of what they would ask me to do. So if they'd say, would you be a panel member? I did it. Then they said, well, would you chair a program? And the first program I chaired was, I still remember, it was November Veterans Day weekend in 1988. And most of the Federal Circuit judges were there. Chief Judge Markey, here I was. By that time, I was a partner, but I was a young partner, and I'm getting these Federal Circuit judges there, and we had to put together the panels, and they spoke on them. So that was neat. And then after that, I was asked to chair one of the organization's panels. It was at the City Bar Association, and it was about biotech. By that time, biotech had been maybe 8 years old or something like that in the practice, So we did a big. I remember the City Bar, the big hall there was filled. That was a great program. And then after that, I was asked to put together that joint practice program. There's a program, it's an all-day program. And there's a different chair each year to run the whole thing, and I was asked to do that. And these were all wonderful experiences because there I got to meet the leadership of the bars in New Jersey and Connecticut as well. There are people from Philadelphia. And you had to have a lot of meetings to put the program together beforehand. So that was neat. I got to meet a lot of the giants in this practice. And I was lucky because I was a pretty young guy.
Sure, no, the JPP-CLE is still ongoing, as well as the Patent One Day program that you were referring to earlier. So let's talk a little about your time as president. What was your trajectory in the association leading you to become the president?
Well, after I chaired those programs, I was asked to be a chair of a committee. John Pegram was then the president, and he asked me, the presidents pick the chairs of the various committees. So he asked me to chair a committee, and I did. And then I think I was chairing that committee for a year or two, and then I was asked to be a board member. So I was a board member, Rob, I think I started as a board member in '92, and they're 3-year terms. So I did, I was elected twice to be a board member. And in the second term, then I was asked to be the treasurer of the association. And I have to give a shout out to my wife here because we still didn't have an executive director in those days. So I think I became treasurer in '97. I think that was it. And they delivered all these boxes to my office with all this paper. Okay, we have no executive. So in essence, the treasurer was running the association, but with no computerized records. So I remember we have 4 children. I came home for dinner, having dinner with my wife and the 4 children. My wife said to me, "What's on your mind? Because you never usually bring to the table here." I said, "I don't know what I'm going to do with all these papers that I have in my office." And she said, what is it? I said, well, the records of the association, the financial records, they're all paper going back forever. And before we got married, my wife had been in the accounting department of a firm, so she knew about computerized records. She goes, "Let me see them. I'll put them all on the computer." And
Wow.
not our personal computer, but
Sure.
so that anyone could take it. So she did that. She computerized the records of the association. And then it was a dream job being treasurer then because it was very easy. So I did that, and I think I was treasurer for 4 years, Rob. And then I was elected to be on the ladder, the second
Sure.
vice president, and that's how that led up to my becoming the president.
Yeah. Well, you certainly had plenty of experience on the board for all those years, and certainly as treasurer, you really do get the perfect view of the operation.
Right.
From my perspective, I mean, I've never really said this, but I think because of that position should probably be a ladder position, but that's a whole other story. I guess I really haven't pushed on that. But I do think as treasurer, you really do get the full view of the operation.
Yeah, I agree with you.
So before we get into some specifics about your presidency, can you give us a general overview of the intellectual property landscape in terms of the issues confronting the IP community during the time that you were president?
Yeah, it was a very interesting time. While I was president, the Federal Circuit decided the eBay case as well as the KSR case while I was president of the Federal Circuit. So there was a lot of discussion. Of course, in 2006, a year after I was president, the Supreme Court decided the eBay case. And then 2 years after I was president, the Supreme Court decided the KSR case. But those were hot topics. We had a lot of CLE programs when I was president. I was really honored that we had that opportunity. We did a couple of amicus briefs. I knew you were going to ask me about this, so I looked it up because I remember eBay and KSR very clearly because it was something that everyone talked about. But there were a couple of amicus briefs that we did. One was the Merck, I wrote it down, the Merck versus Integrum case, and the other was the Phillips versus AWH case. They pale in comparison now to what happened with eBay and KSR. But we had a lot to be talking about at that time. And initially, soon in my term as president, we were told by the House of Representatives, I think the chair of the subcommittee on patents then was Lamar Smith from Texas, and he wanted to come to New York and talk about possible new patent law, the law that ended up becoming AIA. Okay, and so it was an honor. He came to New York, and the immediate past president, someone I've known since the first day I started practicing, Mel Garner, we were associates together. And so he was the immediate past president. And as I'll say more when we're talking about the presidency, it's a tremendously collegial organization. And things that happened during my presidency were things that were an amalgam, if you will, of what was going on before and then continued afterwards. So I can't claim personal credit for anything. I did things with our colleagues, and it was just a wonderful operation to hear from the leader of the House in the United States wanting to talk to us in New York about the law, and having Mel there, and we talked, and then we ended up, I got a couple calls from different members of Congress asking the views about things and what we should be looking for in a new law. So it was very interesting.
Yeah, no, that's interesting to learn. I didn't realize that history. And, as you know, we now have the Legislative Action Committee, and we do get engaged. We've done work with Senators Coons and Tillis throughout this more recent period of time, trying to work on the patent law reforms.
Right.
So, can you give us a general overview of the various tasks and responsibilities you were charged with during your term as president?
Well, we were certainly responsible for doing whatever people thought was important from the big picture perspective, which I've just mentioned, the big cases and what the House was thinking about. And the organization had already been established to, in a nuts and bolts way, provide the membership with the vehicles for continuing to learn. CLE became a very big thing. It wasn't a part of what the NYIPLA was doing when I was first a member, but once the state of New York required lawyers to have CLE, it became a very important aspect of the organization. I believe Herb Schwartz was president when he made sure we had a good CLE committee. So these nuts and bolts were in place, and we had the monthly newsletter. So I had to make sure every month we had a good newsletter, and we have a wonderful membership. People would be happy to write, but we always had a good newsletter. We always had good meetings. We have a great CLE. Always had a great CLE. That as I said, I think Herb started that, and people wanted to talk about amicus briefs and things like that. So it was important for us to be truly a resource for members who wanted to learn about things and wanted to talk to people who knew about things.
Yeah, that tradition continues, that's for sure. But it's clear that your time as presidency was quite an active transitional period.
Yeah, it was great. It was a real treat. It was.
Yeah. So did you have any specific goals or mission that you wanted to accomplish during your time as president? And if so, what was it, or were they?
Thanks very much, Bob. Well, the organization was established to serve the bench and bar, and I pretty much, I have to say, was consciously determined to be sure that we did the best we could to do that. I remember I went to GW Law School, and first day of patent law, Irving Caton, the legendary Irving Caton, was the professor. And I still remember what he said the first day. It was a long time ago, but he said, "You have signed up to be servants. You have signed up to be patent lawyers, which means you want to serve. You want to serve someone who is creating something or has created something that didn't exist before, and that inventor doesn't know how to protect it. You're going to learn how to protect inventions, and that's what you're going to do. And you're going to serve the public by serving the bar, serving your clients, and so forth, in a way that people actually benefit in this country from the contributions of your clients." So serving the bench and bar and this organization does that in a great way. And one of the great things it does is bring them together. And now I'll go back to Rich DeLucia was president 2 years before I was. So, you know, when you're on the ladder, at one point when you're a vice president, you're really running the dinner, okay, the judge's dinner. You're the one who makes sure, you know, you go to the kitchen. This was at the Waldorf. You go and you see how it works in the kitchen and everything else and so forth. And Rich said to me, so he was president when this happened, but I knew I was going to be president in 2 years. It was Rich, then it was going to be Mel, it's me. And I wanted to do this, but Rich said, "How can we make this dinner better than it currently is?" I said, "I have an idea," which I wanted to do when I was president. We'll do it while you're president. Let's have a Distinguished Public Service Award. And that's how that came about, because I've done a lot of pro bono work. In the time I've been in New York, I do a lot of pro bono work for the Archdiocese. And they have these dinners, and they honor somebody at the dinners. And there's a program, you know, so I said, I think it's a wonderful thing at these dinners I go to for pro bono causes. We should do it. And everybody on the board says, "It's a great idea. Great, let's do it." And so Judge Newman was my honoree, and I wanted to do that. When I had thought about it, I thought, well, I hope that I get the chance to do it, because now I've told the board we should do it, okay? And so it did work out, it did. And so when we were ready to walk out onto the dais, and it was, at the time, it was the biggest judges' dinner that the Waldorf had. It was, I know it was over 3,000, but I don't know what number, but it was a big dinner. And we were waiting to go out, and, you know, they announce you and so forth. And she turned to me and she said, "John, what do you think's the best thing about the NYIPLA?" I said, "Judge, I think it's difficult to be a jerk with someone you had lunch with once a month for years. You get along, and you have cases against some of these." But I gestured, you know, we have cases against some each other sometimes, but we work together professionally and collegially. And she said, "I know that." She had been a president. So she had been a member herself of the board when she was in private practice. And she said, "I know that." And she said, "And judges appreciate that too, very, very much." So the goal was to make sure that we as an organization had a year in which that would just grow, that kind of feeling.
Sure. Oh, it certainly prevails. So, from your perspective, what was your greatest accomplishment or proudest moment during your time as president?
It was to be a part of something that I've alluded to, the contributions that others made. I was very happy up there to give Judge Newman that award. And it wasn't the inaugural award, because we had done it 2 years earlier, but I thought of it a couple of years earlier. And it was because of Rich asking me, you know, he was the president. He said, "John, I want you're running this dinner. I want you to come up with a way it would be," and he was wonderful. He said, "Let's do it. Let's do it." Mel Garner, my immediate predecessor, he was attending all of our meetings as the immediate past president. And he had an idea in the fall. He said, "You know, some organizations give scholarships. So we should think about giving us." I said, "That's a great idea." And we put it to a vote. So we said, "Yeah, we're going to have a scholarship." And I said, "Let's give it at the dinner." And the first scholarship recipient was female African American. And I had it given to her by Mel, who was the first African American president of this organization, and Andrea Ryan, who also was our partner early on, and she was the first female president of the association. So both of them gave this, they had this big blow up check that they gave her, $15,000 or whatever it was up on the stage at the Waldorf. So she got it in front of thousands of people, and that was neat. It was a really nice night, and because of it, the judges really liked it. And of course, it is in honor of the federal judiciary, and the judges liked it a lot. And I got to, talk with them a lot. And because of that, I've been invited to the Second Circuit Judicial Conference. It's held every other year, but I've been invited to it every other year since then. It's nice.
That's great. That's great. And this year we're honoring Second Circuit Judge Bianco,
Right.
who happens to be one of my favorite judges. When he first got on the bench, I had a case with him, and I've done other civil litigation, not just IP, but mostly patent litigation. But it happened to be an employment case. And he entered the courtroom, and instead of just taking the bench, he came down to each counsel and shook our hand. And he said, I've been in AUSA. He said, so you're going to have to educate me on this case. And I thought that kind of humility it struck me, and it stuck with me. And so he does so much in terms of public service. He epitomizes public service. So hopefully you'll be able to make the dinner this year, John.
I'm going. Yes.
Excellent. Okay. So during your presidency, what was your greatest challenge?
I saw that in the correspondence, and my wife says that I don't remember bad things.
Well, that's great.
Yeah,
that's a great trait.
Yeah, I guess I couldn't think of a problem. Challenge. We had such a great board, and you were on the ladder. You're preparing. When you're on the ladder, you're going to meetings, and someone else is the president, so that person's chairing. But you think to yourself, I think when I'm president, we might want to do this, okay? And so I was going to these meetings for from you mentioned the years I was president, 2004 to 2005. I started going to board meetings in 1992. So I went to a lot of board meetings, and so I have to say that it was the way we continued to work together all those years. It was just a wonderful board. I was very happy as a past president to go, and I knew I would miss it, and I have. Yeah.
Oh, that's nice. So you may have already identified it, but if not, what is your fondest memory?
I would say that the judges were so pleased with that dinner. They really were. And if people were not pleased, they didn't tell me. So I don't know that. Or if they did, I forgot. But I don't remember. But the membership seemed to really find it to be meaningful and enjoyable, and the judges did. And we accomplished a lot. We gave views on important cases that were going on at the time. We gave views to the House of Representatives, which was considering a new patent law. And we held lots of meetings that helped people to continue to be educated and also to meet one another. And we showed interest in young people by beginning the scholarship. I give Mel Garner credit. He's the one who had that idea. We did it, on my term, but it was his idea. And so we let the membership know that new things could happen and that young people were welcome. And I thought people were quite enthusiastic about the practice at the time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, certainly there's no question that during your presidency and even, your tenure on the board, you had the opportunity to implement a lot of initiatives, and that's wonderful. And many of which, remain with the association. That's a great legacy, John.
Well, thank you.
So what advice can you give our younger or newer members of NYIPLA if they aspire to assume a leadership role or perhaps even one day become president of NYIPLA?
My advice would be to show up. You know, there are lots of meetings, there are opportunities. If you go to the meetings, you'll meet nice people. Um, and you'll be working with colleagues either in your company or your firm, or if you're solo practitioner, you'll have a lot of opportunities to meet other people because you're going to these meetings. And you'll, if you really are interested in serving, as Irving Caton said, we all should, you know, if you're really interested in doing that, it is the perfect vehicle for doing it. Because even though now there's an executive director system and so forth, it used to be, boy, you really had to do a lot of stuff. But now, you know, but you still, if we don't have members going to meetings and offering to speak or to write papers or whatever, it'll all just become a social club, you know. But if you're a young person and you want to be involved, if you give, you will receive. By that I mean in your heart, you'll be happy because you'll know that you're helping people. And if you are, that's really its own reward. And sometimes other things come with it. You never know.
Yeah, I love that concept of serving. I mean, I think that that's a great, I think it's correct. You know what you were told when you first took your patent law class. I think it's a correct description of what we do, but it's also a noble exercise. So, what advice can you give younger folks, newer members, to get the most benefit from their membership in NYIPLA? And it probably overlaps with your last answer, but what else can you think of?
Yeah, I think that, and Anthony Giaccio was a former president, and he was an associate, and I was his mentor years ago. And he kind of came to me one day and he said, I would like to be involved. At the time, I was an officer. I think I don't remember which officer, but I think it was after I was treasurer, I was one of the vice presidents. And he said, I would really like to be involved. I said, go to a meeting, and if anybody needs any help, offer to do it. I said, if you really mean it, you'll probably end up being the youngest president of this association. And he might have been, you know, because he really did it. He went, he showed up, and he did a lot. He did a tremendous amount of work, and he was president at a pretty young age.
That's a great story. So, any final thoughts as we wrap up this interview?
I guess you can probably see from the way I'm responding to your questions, I love the association, and I loved every moment that I was involved. You know, and as I said, when I went to my last past presidents, I went to my last meeting as a past president, the last board meeting. I said, well, I'm going to miss this, you know, because it's really important. But you know, time moves on, you do other things. But it was an honor, you know, to first start out when people I regarded as giants were running this association, real giants. I thought, my goodness, I'm just a boy from Albany, and I'm in the same room with these people, you know. So it was an honor to get the job at some point after them, and I'm just delighted that the association, through your efforts and the efforts of others, since I've moved aside, moved on, just continuing to make the association thrive, and it's continuing to serve the bench and bar in a great way.
It's great, John. You know, excuse me. I mean, that's one of the reasons I decided that we should create the past presidents committee, because I truly believe it's you know a wealth of experience that the association can still certainly benefit from, and certainly the newer, younger members who become the next generation of leaders. And I have to tell you, just from a personal perspective, I kind of regret that you and I didn't get to work together more, because I've been a member since 90, although I really didn't become very active until probably early 2000s. Um, But this has been a very pleasant conversation, John. I really appreciate that you've done it.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. I was honored to get the invitation and looking forward to it. So.
Excellent.